I have finished Halo Infinite's main campaign, so I think it's about time that I give my thoughts on it and talk about the story. Also, there will be spoilers in this. I'll have spoilers in the title, but the game's been out for about a week. I'm going to give people more time, though, to play it and absorb it all before I release anything that doesn't have a spoiler warning. I'm not going to really talk about the gameplay much. It's mostly just the story. And just a little nugget on the gameplay. I think it's fantastic. It's probably the best gameplay since Halo 3. It might even rival Halo 3. I'll go over the gameplay stuff when I do my full review of the game at some point. But for right now, like I said, I just want to go over the story. Because I have a lot to say about it. So, first of all, I think their villains were excellent. They kind of have three villains in this. It's four, actually. Kind of. It's Escharum, I would say, is the main villain. Followed by Jaga Ardamni. And then Atriox. And then Cortana, sort of, even though I'll get to Cortana because the way that she was used in this was interesting, but I get why they had to do it. Atriox may be a major villain, and he's, spoiler, the first person you see, really, in this, or like one of the first people you see in the game. Which, wow, that opening. I mean, I made a video about how terrible that take was from Kotaku because that opening floored me. I had the feeling we'd see Atriox at some point, but I didn't know when. I would assume maybe towards the end, as like a tease for one of the expansions that's coming. Because I'm like, Chief's got to fight him at some point, right? And we also saw concept art of them two fighting. And of course, by the end of the game, he's still alive, which is smart on 343's part. I guess they've learned their lesson now of to stop killing off cool villains. Because I think that was their biggest problem with Halo 4 is the Didact. They set him up so well, and he was such a cool villain, and then he's just wasted. And then he gets killed off for real in a comic. Well, quote-unquote for real. He gets composed, so technically he could come back. But I think finally they realized, yeah, we probably shouldn't kill off a cool villain that we just introduced. Although they do kill off two of them, Escharum and Jaga, but I think they had enough screen time that it was satisfying. They were the two main villains over the course of the whole game, basically. Escherum's kind of like Atriox light, but he's got way more dialogue. He's arguably, I mean, well, yeah, I think he is more interesting. We haven't learned enough about Atriox at this point, but Escherum's got. I do think they did a good job of, through his dialogue, kind of setting up who the Banished are and like their philosophy and how they differ from the Covenant, and especially for people that didn't play Halo Wars 2. If you didn't play Halo Wars 2, if you listen to all the audio logs and listen to all of Escherum's dialogue, it gives a good idea of what they're all about. And then Jake is just plain cool. He's just a really cool assassin. They don't really outright say it, but I sort of think he's from the Silent Shadow. I'm not positive. It's like that group of elite assassins. I don't think that was ever stated, though. Because as far as I know, they aren't affiliated directly with the Banished, but maybe they teamed up. I don't know about all like the many splinter groups of the Covenant now. I'm not 100% up on all the lore. I was also kind of wondering while playing like where Pavium and Voridus are. You know, the two guys from the Halo Wars 2 Flood DLC. And I'll get to the Flood, by the way. It's during this. This might come across as a little bit scatterbrained because I just took notes while I was playing, so it's not a coherent. It's not going to be like a written review. I'm going to do that at some point, but this is just my thoughts thrown onto a video. So the Banished, I think they're all really cool. The Endless, though, I'm a little bit confused by who they are supposed to be, and it feels like a new threat that 343 just kind of pulled out of thin air, because this whole time I was expecting... I do feel a little bit like the ending was not necessarily abrupt, but a little bit anticlimactic, because I felt like the game was building and building and building towards this huge finale, and it's not really huge. Yeah, you fight the Harbinger and you take her out, but she was summoning something during that final battle, and I thought what was going to happen was you defeat her, and then like during that cutscene where Chief is talking to now dead Cortana, like the memory of her or whatever, I thought during that cutscene it was going to be like the Harbinger would interrupt or something, like she wasn't, kind of like what they did with Escharum, where you kill him and then he interrupts you and he's like, "Oh, I'm still alive, fight me." That was really cool. Like you assume he's dead, but he, with his last bit of life, he gets back up and he like wants to fist fight you. But I thought it would succeed, whatever she was teleporting to that room, and I thought it was going to be maybe like a resurrection of the Primordial or something, or her name is the Harbinger, so I thought maybe she was resurrecting something, or like she was a harbinger of doom or something, like, or bringing back the flood or something, or summoning a grave mind. I don't know. Well, my big thing was I was hoping it was going to be Mendicant Bias, but well, some of this might sound a little ignorant because again, I'm not 100% up on the lore. I'm not Hidden Xperia. Like he would probably watch this and cringe. So there are things I'm going to get wrong in this video because I'm several novels behind. I am not 100% sure on the entire history of the Precursors and Mendicant Bias and the Primordial, all that stuff. So I'm going to get things wrong. Correct me in the comments. So yeah, after you took out the Harbinger, I thought there'd be maybe one more surprise boss, but there wasn't, and it's definitely set up for something in the future. But she just, like, that whole thing about the Endless just feels kind of taken out of nowhere. And I thought, I could have sworn the Endless is what they called the Primordials, or the Precursors, or whatever. I thought that was just another name for them in some of the books. But it sounds like this is a completely new faction that they've created, specifically for Zeta Halo, because, like, there's a part where Chief says, yeah, every ring is different. So, like, basically saying, yeah, the reason why you didn't see these before is because they were only here on Zeta Halo. Okay, I guess so. But what I do take issue with a little bit is the fact that there's a part, like, there's a line of dialogue, something about the flood is mentioned, and then I think Cortana asks him something about if it's the flood, and he's like, no, it's something worse. And I just thought that was kind of lame. Like, I don't want them to try to, like, basically denigrate the flood and be like, that wasn't the real threat. There's actually a bigger threat out there. Because the flood were, like, the biggest threat. Like, think about how OP the flood were. There's almost no stopping them, and, like, Chief was basically the only one that could do it. And of course, there's still some pockets of flood left, like on the Ark in Halo Wars 2. But I think it's a little bit of a stretch to be like, ooh, this new threat is even bigger than the flood. It's the problem I had with Starkiller Base in Star Wars, where they're like, oh, remember the Death Star? Well, this is the Death Star, but bigger and even more dangerous. It's like two kids playing with action figures and making up stuff like, oh, my guy can do this. He can bend time and space, and then the other guy's like, well, actually, no, mine can time travel. I don't know. I just think it's a little bit lazy writing. So I think the choice to have Cortana basically be dead at the start of the game and just see her in flashbacks was like, it was an interesting choice. I don't think it was, I'm kind of neutral on it. I don't think it was good or bad. Well, it was probably better than how they handled it in 5. But I understand why they had to do it. Brian Reed kind of wrote themselves into a corner with Halo 5. And so they couldn't really show how she was trapped and deleted, because I thought that was interesting how we didn't see any of that. They just talk about that it did happen. They're like, you were basically a copy of Cortana, and we were going to use you to imitate Cortana and lock her down and bring her to the Infinity for deletion. It's super vague. Like, what does it even mean? What does it mean to lock her down? Like, how did you trap her? Because you think about how OP she got at the end of Halo 5, and yeah, they completely painted themselves into a corner. She had, like, every AI in the galaxy on her side, so what exactly were they supposed to do? And if you really start to think about it too much, it kind of breaks down a little bit, because she can just basically, like, snap her fingers and probably blow up Infinity if she wants. If she has control, like, over she can hack into any computer. She's basically Ultron, but more powerful. So how did the humans stand a chance at all? So there's a kind of questions about, like, so how and why wasn't she able to stop them when they created a clone of her? And I don't know. The whole thing about Cortana and us not seeing it. They were trying to paper over the problems of 5. 5 had this giant gaping wound in the story, and they had to put a big Band-Aid on it. Curse you, Brian Reed! I mean, yeah, I don't know how else you were going to get out of that. There was no easy way to fix that story. You couldn't really start off right where 5 ended, and I understand why they didn't. Although, I gotta say, I'm really sad about the Infinity blowing up. And also, I like all the audio logs that you can hear Lasky in there. You can find out what he was up to. But I like all the audio logs talking about all that went down on the Infinity when it blew up. But part of me kind of wishes that was Mission 1 instead of Mission 1 being, what is it called? Warship Gabrakan. Because it's similar to the first Star Wars. You're just dropped into a situation like something big had just happened and you don't know what. And you kind of piece it together over the course of the movie with Star Wars. And this is kind of the same thing, where something big just happened. You don't know what exactly, but you'll find out over the course of the game. But part of me wishes we could have been in the Infinity talking to Lasky when it gets attacked, and you have to escape it as it's blowing up or something, like getting an escape pod. I don't know. It could have been cool. Maybe they planned that and they just ran out of time. I don't know. But dude, that opening cutscene though, like probably one of the best cold opens for Halo. And I did like, this is more of a gameplay thing. Well, maybe it's less of a like pure story thing, but a little bit, a little qualm I have is I do like the whole one shot thing they're going for. They're trying to go for like the God of War 2018 thing where they have like one continuous shot. But the downside of that is you can't be as cinematic. You can't get like some of those really cool shots you had in the original trilogy because with those you can have the camera wherever you want. Obviously, you get some really cinematic shots. But if you're going for this basically over the shoulder with Chief the whole time look, there's only so much you can do with the cinematography. That's just a personal choice, or I mean, that's just a personal opinion. But it was a design choice they wanted to go with. But I do think it takes away a little bit of the cinematic aspect. I had heard that people got emotional with the ending, with like Chief and Cortana's final goodbye, but I didn't really. I was expecting to be more so. Like I was way more upset at the end of Halo 4 than I was here, and I feel like it's because uh, basically all that happens is Cortana is like, yeah, you can just use this new Cortana, the weapon, and she doesn't have all the baggage that I do, and I'm sorry that I screwed up, Chief, but I'm already dead, and peace out. What I thought was going to happen is it turns out she's not dead, and maybe she's, I don't know, like she's discovered the remains of Mendicant Bias or something. She's like merging with him. She's merging with some other AI that she comes across. So it's revealed she's not dead, and then you have to do, I think what would have been the most effective, and I don't know how they would have pulled it off though, is Chief is forced to kill her basically. Like he's forced to destroy her. So think about a final boss with some kind of AI. I don't know who, but she's merged with them, and you have to do something in that room to destroy this AI. But in doing so, you're going to kill Cortana, but you have no choice. Like I think that would have been a better emotional goodbye between Chief and the original Cortana. Like that would have wrapped up their IRL 20-year story. I don't know how many years it is in game. But yeah, like I said, I don't know. I just thought their final, maybe if I play it again, it'll hit differently. But in my initial playthrough, I wasn't that emotionally affected by their final goodbye. Let me know if you were in the comments, because I don't know, something about it was just off to me. Because she's just dead, like at the beginning of this game, and we don't know how or why. And like I said, they had no choice because they were written into a corner. Or another theory I had was that maybe the weapon was actually Cortana and she was just pretending to be on Chief's side the whole time. Basically pull a 343 Guilty Spark. You could mirror that whole thing from Halo 1 where like Guilty Spark is like doo 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 doo. He's all like cheery, pretending to be on your good side, and then towards like the end he's like, "Oh, actually psych." Or no, that was like the middle of the game, right? Yeah, where he's like, "No, psych, I'm actually evil. Activate the ring, dude." Because they kept having that thing where Chief would see the thing that says red flag, and I was like, oh, maybe he's suspicious of it too. And so I thought that's what they were setting up. Because we can assume, like, I think we've all assumed this whole time that Cortana was corrupted by Mendicant Bias, right? Like, doesn't it say as much in the terminals in Halo 3 that that's what happened? It's not explicit, but it sure seems like that's what happened. Like, the remains of Mendicant Bias gave her the logic plague or whatever. I kind of wished and was hoping that was the case. But so far, like, even with the audio logs, I haven't heard a single mention of Mendicant Bias, which kind of sucks. However, and I'll get to the end, but they do mention offensive bias. So I was talking about how all of like old Cortana scenes are basically visions the Chief was having, and they did a ton of that. A lot of the expository exposition of the game was given to you through flashbacks or visions, and I loved a lot of them, like the ones with Halsey, uh, her talking about like the original Spartan group, or like creating the original Spartans, and Blue Team talking about Chief as a kid, and like you see that weird vision of that kid running around in that room. Like it's easily missable. There's like a little hologram child running around in the room. And then the part that I was like, holy crap, this is awesome, is when there's that vision of with new dialogue from what's his face, Captain Keyes. You got the. I'm pretty sure that's the same voice actor, right? It sounds like him, but he's got new lines. I'm pretty sure all those were new, and you have a little scene with him and the dude that plays him. Just probably got a paycheck just to come in for one day for that line, but it was definitely worth it. I did really like the fact that there's references to. I mean, there's references to the old games everywhere. Like the grunt. There's probably tens of thousands of grunt lines in this game. A lot of them are really funny, but a lot of them reference things from the past. Like I think there's Arbiter references. There is a reference in one of the audio logs to Locke and what he's up to and Blue Team. So I'm glad that that was in there. I don't know if there's one talking about the rest of Osiris team, like Buck. Maybe there is. I just haven't come across it yet. And Cortana even mentions Admiral Hood. Is it Admiral? I think it is. I mean, they say Lord Hood, and I can't remember his actual first name. But she's like, there's a flashback scene with evil Cortana basically threatening Lord Hood and Earth, and I was like, that's cool. There's no line from Hood. Like, she's just talking to him, and there's just no line. That kind of sucks. I don't think Ron Perlman's busy right now. He could have gone to their studio or even from home, recorded like 3 lines or something and sent it to him. That would have been cool. Oh well. Maybe he can return some other time in an expansion or something. I don't know. Also, this is just a funny little trivia thing. I don't know how many people know this, but I was watching the credits, and to my surprise, I noticed that the voice actor for Atriox, it wasn't John DiMaggio who played him in Halo Wars 2, and because of that, one of my friends actually assumed that's why he wouldn't be in the game, because apparently there was some dispute with John DiMaggio and like 343, and like he wouldn't come back to play Atriox. I don't know what happened there. So we figured no Atriox, and then it turns out Ike Amati voices him, and who else did Ike Amati voice? Agent Locke. So you got the same dude that plays Locke playing Atriox, and it's kind of funny. I mean, he sounds basically the same as he did in Halo Wars 2, so the guy must have done a good job. Sadly, still no Artas. He's not back. You know, the shipmaster from Halo 2 and 3. I would have liked to see him again. See what he's up to. He's probably doing something on Sanghelios. Didn't see any of the swords of Sanghelios or the Arbiter. That would have been cool. Again, probably stuff for the future. No, again, I haven't found all the audio logs, but as of yet, I haven't heard any references or seen any references to the Spirit of Fire crew or Spartan Red Team. And the biggest bummer for me for this story was no Flood, even though I saw it coming. I was getting a big chunk of the way through the game, and I'm like, well, I feel like I'm probably 2/3 of the way through this game, and there's still no Flood, so I don't think it's happening. And of course, the game's rated T, but I've already talked about the fact that Halo Wars 2 was rated T, and they still had Flood, so I don't know if that's necessarily indicative of Flood or not. But I don't think the possibility is gone that they could still come back. Like, if we find out more about the Endless, because like the Endless, I don't know if the Endless are older than the Flood or what, but the whole Endless plot is very interesting because they're like some kind of weird species that survived that survived the Halo being fired, which is fascinating. Like, they're the only species that could. I guess that's kind of a cool concept that's never been explored. Like, we just assume that the Halo ring can destroy all sentient life, but I assume the premise for this idea was like someone asked, hey, what if there was a species that was sentient but couldn't be killed by the ring? Like, that's an interesting idea. And the design of the Endless is kind of weird. Like, or the Harbinger, but she's the Endless. She kind of looks like something out of Destiny, to be honest. But like I was just saying, I don't think the Flood returning is out of the question, because I didn't even notice this, but somebody pointed this out. The Harbinger had some lines that were pulled straight from the Flood and the Gravemind. One I didn't even realize was when she says, I will talk and you will listen. I mean, that's the Gravemind's line, the I will talk and you will listen. And then there's another one, condemned to a fate I did not deserve. That's another Gravemind line. So, I don't know. I think there's some kind of connection between the Endless and the Flood, so I don't think all hope is lost, at least for this initial release of the game, because we got to remember this is the platform, quote unquote, for the future of Halo that they claim will last 10 years, but we'll see about that. It is kind of the end of an era, though, to not have any new Halo games launch. If it's just going to keep updating this, it's going to be like Fortnite, where you have a launch and it just keeps updating the game. But I guess that's the future. Call me a boomer, but I'm going to miss the days of just getting a game just completed on the disc and you play it and then it ends. But no, we're in the like I've enjoyed the heck out of this game, but it does feel a little bit weird because it does feel incomplete. And knowing that more biomes will come, it's kind of like if you bought Red Dead Redemption 2 and they only had forests and they were like, yeah, you're going to get DLC later that adds the swamps and the tundras and the deserts and stuff like that. I mean, it's not a perfect comparison. And again, I loved the game and I'm still playing it. But I do see the complaint about like the lack of biome diversity, I guess. Well, I guess you could say biodiversity, but that complaint I think is valid. But again, it's a platform they're going to evolve over time, so I guess that's just gaming in 2021. And apparently a third of this game was cut back in 2019, so maybe some of that was like desert and stuff. I don't know. All right, let me go back through some of my notes. I kind of went out of order. I was just kind of rambling and wasn't going through all my notes in order. Yeah, just I was talking about how I would have liked to participate maybe in the Infinity getting blown up. And I wrote down that it would have been cool to maybe have a mini boss with Atriox in the beginning that you have to, that you like it forces you to fail. Like you have to fight him, but it's not beatable. It's not winnable. That could have been cool. But I don't know if that would lessen the impact of like just the straight up cold open just slaps you in the face with that cutscene. I wrote that overall the story was kind of light, and yeah, that is true. There's the story was there was kind of light on plot, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, and it was definitely necessary after the super bloated plot and kind of all over the place plot of Halo 5. And I mean, you really only have a handful of characters too. What you have just like Chief, the pilot, Cortana, the weapon, uh, the Harbinger, Escharum, Jaga, and that's kind of it. Atriox sort of, but he's barely in it. Atriox, I already mentioned that I'm glad that they learned their lesson about not killing him. But he's going to be probably this overarching villain over the next who knows how long for Halo Infinite, where he's like the king on the chessboard, and right now we're just taking out pawns and bishops and knights, and Escharum and Jaga were kind of like knights or bishops or something, or maybe even a queen. But eventually we're going to get to the king, and that's Atriox. But I think after Halo 5's reception, they kind of had to go back to the drawing board. And they reuse a lot of lines. Like, there's a lot of callbacks. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it almost goes overboard at times. I mean, Chief reuses some of his famous one-liners. I mean, he says, I need a weapon, and finish the fight. A little bit on the nose, but I'm not going to say I didn't smile at that. And the reason why I think maybe went overboard is because he has some new ones. Because I've only played it once, I can't remember them right now. But he had some excellent one-liners in this game. Like I feel like Chief in this game was way closer to the Chief in 3 than in 4 and 5. Like it feels like the writers of this game really captured the essence of Halo 3 Chief more so than they did in the last two. And it's not surprising because the writers for this game worked on, I don't know if people know this, if it's like widespread knowledge or not, but Paul Crocker, I think is his name, was a writer on this, and was heavily involved with the stories of Batman Arkham Asylum and Arkham City, and those games are great. So it's not shocking to me that the dialogue in this and the plot overall was pretty good. So I wrote this for the end, but it doesn't really, I don't know if it applies here yet, because like I said, this game is going to go on for a while. So this little bit I wrote at the end maybe applies in a few years, maybe 5 years or whatever, like when this game's life is coming to an end, because I wrote something about how, I do not want the Halo community to kill me for this, because I know it's super, super controversial, but as somebody that appreciates good storytelling, I do think at some point, and I know people don't want to hear this, but Chief either has to die or retire, because how many times can he do this? How many times can the same guy keep saving the universe and like before it starts to get nonsensical? Because I don't want to be like playing Halo 12 and it's still Chief and Cortana, and also like not only the fact that Chief's going to be old, but I mean, look at the actor Steve Downes that plays Chief. He's 70 now. Like he can't keep doing this forever. And the Halo universe is gigantic, so even if you don't just keep doing Chief stories, you can go in so many other directions. And I know what people are going to say. Oh, they tried that in 5 and that didn't work. I think it could have worked if you had good writers, but you didn't. Like going that direction, having a new Spartan team could have been awesome, but you just had the worst possible writer doing it. So there's a million directions you could do. You could have Chief pass the mantle to someone like Jerome. He could be the new Chief. Because like the name Master Chief can live on, and he can that title can pass to another person, but the actual guy John could retire. I would much rather see him retire with grace than die. I don't want to see him get killed. I mean, yeah, like there's only so many times you can do the Chief Cortana story and still remain fresh and interesting. And it's been going for 20 years now. So I think when this game is done and it's got one final, I don't even know what it's going to look like, but like concluding DLC chapter, this final one, Chief is like, all right, I feel like I've saved this universe enough times that it's time to hang up the helmet. And maybe I'm gonna get dislikes for that in this video. I don't know, but I just feel like for the sake of the story, we have to move on from Chief. And I don't. It kind of hurts to say that, but like he had such an extraordinary feat at the end of Halo 3, and it felt like an ending there. And so, and then you did it again for another trilogy. It's like, can you do a third trilogy with Chief? I don't think so. And it's always been my theory that Halo 6, which ended up being this game, I did think for the longest time that this is where his story would end. But and maybe when all is said and done, his final fight with Atriox, he might lose. I would hate to see that though. I would like to see. Oh man, I'm just imagining how this could all end, and it could be really cool if they don't screw it up. But you could have Chief like on the ropes. He's almost dead. Atriox is just beating him to a pulp. But the weapon is put out like distress signals before then, and very close right before he's just about to be taken out, you got red team and blue team show up, and they assist him in the fight. I don't know how you would write that. They can't just show up. It's got to be done well. But I think that'd be really cool. And I'm very curious. I'm going to make a video at some point about what I want to see for the future of this game, because I don't know what you do. Like, how do you, with the expansions, what, do you just keep building out Zeta Halo? I guess you could keep making new islands to explore and new missions and stuff to do. But are we ever going to leave Zeta Halo, or are we going to be on Zeta Halo for the next 10 years, if that's how long this lasts? Or are we going to, something I would love is what if we went to the Ark? What if it's still Halo Infinite, but you actually get to go to the Ark at some point and explore an open world Ark? That'd be amazing. And also at some point they have to ditch last gen, because they made it really hard on themselves trying to make this game work on 8-year-old hardware, and also the Series X and PC. So at some point they're going to have to ditch the Xbox One. So actually, I almost forgot about this, but the very last thing I wanted to talk about was the ending, the very, very ending. Like, I watched the end credit scene, and then I watched the legendary ending, and that turns out it's the exact same, but it's got voiceover. And I was a little bit confused by it because, well, actually, maybe I wasn't paying attention or I was tired, but I saw the tag that said, what was it, like 20,000 something BCE. I saw that, and maybe it didn't go into my brain. It just didn't register or something. It just went in one ear and out the other. And then I saw Atriox, but for like 15 minutes, I didn't put the two together, that there's Atriox, but then he's in BCE time. I somehow it slipped my mind. And then like 20 minutes later, I'm like, wait a minute, did he time travel? So I knew from like, I was hoping and guessing that he wasn't dead throughout the whole game, because I remember playing this campaign, and like there's several times where people make references to, oh, Atriox is dead. Well, they outright say Atriox is dead, and they keep talking about how Estrom's gonna continue his legacy. They're all like, yeah, he's gone, he can't do anything, and I'm just like, did I miss the part that he died? Because we never see it. We see him standing on the Infinity, you get thrown out of it, and then it blows up, so you assume he died on it. My guess was that he got in an escape pod, or like a small ship, and yeeted himself out of there. So, but that's not what happened. He got, I don't know what, Like, I was like, what on earth? He got sent back in time? Question mark? Not positive, because, oh boy, if they introduce time travel, that's, I don't like that at all. I don't like when any sci-fi universe that attempts to be somewhat grounded, I mean, not everything in Halo is grounded, but they try to be somewhat grounded. If you introduce time travel, you will screw up this whole universe. I'm telling you, don't do it. But if they can write it well, like not it's not necessarily time travel that can be done more than once, like replicated. I don't, maybe the Endless or Mendicant Bias, somebody, I don't know, the Harbinger, or not the Harbinger, the Primordial, I don't know, a precursor, like brought him back in time or something, but it can only be done once. I'd be okay with that. But please don't make some new mechanic that's like, hey, we can go back in time whenever we want, because that will just ruin everything. So I don't know what's going on in that final scene. I don't know whose voice that is that's talking. And then like the big bombshell is he says not Mendicant. He says offensive bias has been activated. And I was like, "Oh boy, that is cool." And I know some about like the offensive bias, Mendicant bias, and all that. Maybe I need to read up more on them, but I know enough about them that that's going to be a cool plot development. And I know there's a lot of people that have been hoping for that and crossing their fingers for that, and like especially Hidden Xperia, shout out to him. I feel like he might be just a tad bit disappointed because he probably was hoping that Mendicant or offensive bias were in this game, and that's what I find annoying about this, about the ending, is that it felt like a carrot on a stick instead of a definitive, like they put their foot down, like this is the end. It's not necessarily a cliffhanger, but it's a lot of loose ends. And one thing I was super annoyed about at Halo 5 is there was a cliffhanger, and we had to wait 6 freaking years to find out what happens next. And now we have sort of, not a cliffhanger really, but a bunch more loose ends. We presumably, God, hopefully, won't have to wait 6 years again. Hopefully at the most 2. Maybe, I would prefer it to be less, but it's probably 2, maybe 3, I don't know. To find out what on earth happens next. And, I mean, our cliffhanger from 5 kind of wasn't resolved. It was kind of just all pushed under the rug and be like, yeah, stuff happened, but we aren't going to show you. We're just going to describe what happened. Here's a new story. And I understand, I brought this up in another video, but I understand people's annoyance at the fact that there was no primer at all describing the events of like what happened between 5 and Infinite. And I saw some people suggesting, why was there no recap of all the games? And I don't think is necessary. And I said this basically the same thing in another video, that this is the 8th game in the series, the 8th main FPS game in the series. And if you jump into this game and expect to be catered to as a newbie and told like, hey, all this stuff has happened in like the past 20 years of these games, then I don't know why you thought that was going to happen, because they are not obligated to do that. Go back and play the old games. They're all on Game Pass. I did like what Gears 4 kind of did that, though. They had like a cutscene. No, there was a whole mission that was a flashback, and then there was kind of cutscenes showing what happened over the course of the past 3 games. But this is 7 games? Well, I'm counting Reach and ODST, but okay, let's say 6 or 5, but still, it's more than 3. So I only see that argument a little bit, not completely. But yeah, I think that's all I had down written for my notes. I'm sure I'm forgetting stuff. I'm starting to screw my words up because I don't think I've talked for this long in a video before. I'm definitely going to be more thorough and actually have a scripted review at some point. I don't know how long it's going to take or when it'll be, and I've never actually done this before. I want to actually write a script and have a full scripted review, but I just had to get something out for my thoughts overall of the story. And like I said, I didn't really touch on gameplay at all, really. That'll be review stuff. Like, I definitely have some thoughts about the design and how it does sort of feel like 2 games that have been squished together. But the story overall, I think it blows 5 out of the water big time, easily. But I think it's just because it's simple. 5's story was not simple in the slightest. It's a very simple story, kind of like Halo 1, to be honest. It felt like a throwback to that. Simpler than 4. I can't decide if I like it more than 4's story or not, though. I don't. Here's the thing. I don't think anything is gonna beat 2 for story. 2 probably has. 3 is my personal favorite, even though the story is pretty light. But 2, I think, is objectively has the best story. So I don't know if anything's gonna beat that. But I think all the stuff with like seeing the other side, seeing the Banished, you learn a lot about them, and like Escharum and Jaga were such good villains. They rival all the Covenant stuff you see in Halo 2. Escharum is basically a more interesting and better version of Tartarus. Yeah, 2 is still at the top. Uh, Infinite, it's probably second. I don't know in terms of story. Either that or 3. Halo 2 or 3 or Infinite. 5 is definitely at the bottom. Don't know where 4 falls. I think 4 is probably below 3. I might have to make a new tier list because I already made one, I think, for Halo. But I have to make a new one now. Anyway, I've rambled on long enough for, at this, if I don't edit anything right now, this is 43 minutes, so that's a lot of rambling. Hopefully I'm not really boring, but I'm going to have some infinite gameplay running over this while I talk. And it's going to be mostly me picking up Spartan cores and some cosmetics in the campaign, just me going around collecting those, because that's what I am doing now that I'm done with the main story. So let me know your theories about what comes next after this, and were you satisfied overall by the story? Did you think it was better than... I mean, it's probably not even hard to ask. If like, it's pointless to ask you if it was better than 5, because obviously you're going to say yes. But how does it stack up to 4 and 3 and 2 and the first one? Or even Reach and ODST? And also let me know if you think that the Endless have any connection to the Flood whatsoever, because I was not convinced until it was brought to my attention that she has direct Gravemind lines, and now I'm sort of convinced. And there's going to be, until the next expansion for this game comes out, there's just going to be endless theories, and it's fun to theorize. So I'm sure this won't be my last theory video about Halo Infinite. So that's all I got for now. Like I said, let me know in the comments what you think about the story and if you liked it and what your theories are. And I'm on the road to 100 subscribers. I've noticed recently that if I remind people, that they actually remember and they subscribe. So I'm reminding you now, if you like what I do here, please hit that red subscribe button. And I will hope to see you again soon. Thank you for watching.